Hey there, this is Will Marshall. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get your kick and your sub both in tune and phased align with each other. This is an alternative to sidechaining as a way of dealing with low frequency clashes between your kicks and your subs. As most of you will know, there are often phase cancellation and thus distortion or muddying issues in the low end when you play the two sounds at once. And the classic way of dealing with this is to sidechain the bass or the sub to the kick, so that the volume drops whenever the kick plays and they never actually really overlap with each other. That's fine, but an alternative, and to my mind a cleaner approach, especially for kind of more down-tempo music or work with a lot of interesting bass play, is to actually phase align your kicks and your subs so that when they play together they are locking together and mutually reinforcing rather than cancelling each other out. So for this tutorial we're going to bring up this, which is a tuned kind of trap style kick, which sounds like this. Very sine wavy, got a bit of a click at the start. That's basically a sweep. You've got a higher frequency sine wave sweeping down to that E, and then it just stays solidly in that E, and as you can see in the waveform here, fades out. And it's a sample. At the moment there are multiple samples for each tuning, but we'll change that so there's only one sample that gets pitched up and down as we move the frequency of this kick around. We're going to bring up another channel for our sub, and we're going to be using operator. Operator is awesome for making kind of basic sine wave sub sounds. We're going to be playing the same note, like so, and when we play them together, bam. You can hear there's not really much clashing between those two sounds. They don't sound perfect, they're pretty close. And I'm going to show you what they look like when we zoom in on the waveforms. So we'll flatten the two channels just temporarily so we can zoom in and look at the waveforms. Expand them out a little bit so you can see more clearly, and then zoom in. You can see they're playing the same frequency, so the distance between the peaks in the sine waves is the same, but that the peak or the top of the cycle on the sub is ever so slightly to the left of the peak or the top of the cycle on the kick. That means their phase is slightly out of sync, though not very badly out of sync, which is why they sound pretty good. We're going to undo that freezing and bring it back to MIDI, like so. And you'll see in operator, we actually have this phase control down here. You can see here, that's actually adjusting the phase of the sine wave it's playing currently left and right. Now we want to bump this sine wave ever so slightly to the right. You can see we can only actually go to the left with this control, but 100% is the same as 0%. We want to move it maybe a 5%, maybe 10% to the left, which is the same as 90% or 95% to the right. So we're going to just scroll through this phase setting until we find a sweet spot. It's going to sound worse before it sounds better, which will give you a clear idea of what this phasing actually sounds like. Let's shorten this loop. You can hear in the middle there, the sounds almost cancel each other out completely. That's really bad phase cancellation. So I think the sweet spot is around 90%. You don't have to be super precise with this, just good enough, and you'll use your ears to figure out exactly where you want it. Now, if we freeze these tracks again, like so, and then zoom in on them once more, you can see that the peak of this cycle here and the peak of this cycle here are a little bit closer in alignment. We probably actually want to bump it from 90 down to 89 just so this is ever so slow, more perfectly in alignment, but it's getting really close. You can see that the two sounds are playing the same frequency, they're in alignment, and they're going to be reinforcing rather than cancelling each other out. So let's undo that and bump that down to 89 rather than 90. Now, in order to make this consistent so that the phase is always in sync provided that the two sounds are playing at the same time, what we'll want to do is resample both the kick and the sub and then put them into sampler instruments so they get pitched up and down. And then provided you play the same note in both, so say like a G0 in both the kick and the sub, they'll always remain in sync and they'll always be reinforcing. So all we need to do is freeze them, hit again, and then flatten them like so. Then we're going to make two new MIDI tracks. So I'm going to call this one kick and this one sub. We're going to put samplers on both those MIDI tracks like so. Like so. We're going to drag the attuned kick into kick. We're going to drop the root key down to E0 since we are playing in E0 there. Then we're going to do the same thing with sub, dropping the root key down to E0. Now we can delete these two initial channels like so. Actually, I'll leave those for a moment because there's one other trick I want to show you. We can leave these two channels like so, and then if we play a series of notes, one here, like so, and just loop that section. We'll play, say, 4 notes here, E0 here, G there, A there, and B flat there. We'll bring that sound up, all of that clip up here, and then we'll mute the original resampled sound we have at the top. Close that down. You can hear they're still in phase alignment. Now, one way you might want to be able to clean that up is if you look at the kick sample. Who's in on the sample here? There's this little bit at the start where it's falling in pitch. So this means that the phase of this sample doesn't become consistent until around the kind of 30 to 40 millisecond mark, around in here, and then it becomes phase locked and consistent. Now that can cause a little bit of a clash between the initial transient of that kick sound and the initial transient of the bass sound, which starts off phase locked. Now it's not bad because these are high frequencies at the start of the kick and low frequencies at the start of the sub, but it could be a little cleaner. And the easiest way to do that is to just put a little bit of attack on your sub sound, maybe at 25 milliseconds. So even when the sub's soloed, there's not really any downside to having a little bit of attack, although you want to keep it as short as possible because you're expecting the transient of your sound to come from kicks and the top end of your bass, etc. This way you have really nice phase locking. Now, there's one kind of final situation or thing you might want to do, which is having complicated kick patterns playing the same note on top of a long sub note. What we're going to do is take out all of these notes here and extend this E out like that, and then we're actually just going to freeze this sub down and flatten it so that we can again see the waveform. Actually, no, we're going to use this long one up the top here, just because it's at a higher level and it's already been set up. And then what we're going to do is shorten this kick at the E0 to make it kind of a quick kick with a short or relatively short decay. So it's just and we're going to play a pattern like boom, boom. Let's see what that sounds like. And we're going to bring the volume up. You can hear the first note is pretty much in phase. Second note, not so great, and then the third note, terrible. So the easiest way to deal with this is, like I said, shorten all these notes a little bit, and then freeze it and flatten it. Something I tend to do is I work in waveforms in Ableton a lot. So I'll pretty much always just have my kick hits as individual samples on a waveform view like this, and move them around and actually have them out of warp mode and pitch them up and down using the transpose button here. That lets you zoom in and really see with your eyes what's going on, as well as listening, and it can help you get everything kind of phase locked. So we know this first sound here is pretty much in phase, right? Just gonna drop that back so there's no overlap. You can see the second one is ever so slightly out of phase, like a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing, and that looks about right. It's going to be a little bit closer. Going to drag that back. Make sure there's no overlap between the sounds is all. And you can see this one here is pretty much perfectly out of phase, which is why it sounds so terrible. So I'm going to just make it a slightly lazy bass note. This also gives me a little bit of groove and shuffle, which sounds good as well. And lock the phase in like so, a little bit more to the left. So the phase in this kick drum is now in line. Now you've got that transient at the start of the bass sound again. So again, let's just go in and use the fade. And I'm going to call this E0 sub. And I'm going to call this E0 kick. Just so that when I'm kind of browsing around my session, I can see what I'm doing. I'm then going to duplicate this kick pattern out, and you'll hear, once again, they're going to be ever so slightly out of phase. So what we're going to do is much the same thing again. I think I'm going to move this one to the left, so this initial kick is actually coming in ever so slightly early. Again, this is actually kind of a nice thing to do because it introduces a bit of swing and shuffle. And I've moved it too far. There we go. Doesn't have to be perfect, as I say. And then I'll move this one, like say, to the left. A little bit more. Yep. And then we will line up the last one by moving it to the right. So now we have this 2-bar phrase with one long subtone. And that clicking is just coming from these kick samples. So what we could do is go into the fades here and just put fades on all of them. And we could actually use the fades to get a little bit of a groove going in this kick. And then so there we have it. We have a kick pattern that's perfectly, if we lock it all together, phase aligned with this sub note here. Everything's kind of mutually reinforcing, and you could compress them together to help catch those peaks and prevent it from getting too much louder when it plays. Thank you.